So this morning, Skip and I were talking, and he mentioned this really dumb problem that he ran across with a guy who was advertising and using a billboard and didn't register a domain.
Yeah.
So this inspired the idea of dumb IT mistakes. We haven't had a good lighthearted episode in a while, like Drinks with IT, which we probably should bring back one of these days.
Yeah. Yeah. We got some members that want to join us on that one.
Yeah. So, for those of you who've never been through a Drinks with IT, if you look in our history of podcasts, there used to be an episode we did every 4 episodes called Drinks with IT, where we'd sit around, drink whiskey or coffee, and talk through just dumb things. And so, this episode, dumb mistakes. We're gonna go through how quickly things can go south if you're not prepared, and even if you are prepared, a well-meaning engineer having a bad day can have
Yeah.
catastrophic failure by just making a bad choice. Let's say, you were fairly young in your career and you were a very wise, capable engineer. Because I mean, that's just the way this guy was.
That's right. I
Wise
can
throughout
imagine.
his years, and was working on a server rack, a half-height one, beautiful, beautiful one with one of these brand new VM clusters in it, and it's on wheels.
Yeah.
And the electrician hadn't heard of lock plugs. And imagine the silence that follows when you tried to move that half rack ever so slightly, and just so you could get back and check the cabling and put in a new cable for a new switch.
Yeah.
And the terror that would go through this wise young man's mind when they realized that they just shut down an entire company.
Yep.
These are the kind of mistakes that stay with us our entire careers. But in the moment, we're like, I got to change my underwear, because I just took down, millions of dollars.
Yep.
And, I remember after that conversation, for those of you who didn't figure it out, it's me. I remember after that conversation, like my boss coming in, what did you do? And I'm like, I was just moving it. How do you not have for lock plugs? And lots of finger pointing ensued. It was ended up being very funny. Like by the time we get everything fired back up, it was don't do that again.
Yeah.
Install lock plugs, and then next week they installed lock plugs. And for those of you listening who don't know what a lock plug is, like when you plug a server in, there's a way to have a server so you turn it and it locks into the wall.
Yep.
And that way you can't do what I just said. Like when you got people walking in the back of racks, like trying to like get around to a back wall or install a new piece of hardware, the last thing you want to have is a trip hazard that is going to shut down a critical system.
No.
And this is why cable management's important. So I'm looking at all you MSPs out there that think that, I'll get to cable management someday. And I'm looking at you very carefully and saying, no, you'll never get back to it.
No.
Do it now to save yourself later.
I don't care about the trip hazards. I mean, that's why we have locking plugs. That's why I have zip ties. If you trip and fall, gee, I'm sorry, but did the server stay plugged in? That's the important question. I don't really care.
I get that there's a bone, coming out of your leg right now, but let's get to the important task here. Did you get the blood on the server? And
still up?
Did you unplug it?
Yeah.
Your leg will heal.
Yeah, and sometimes, it's so. Let me and full disclosure. All right, this one is not me. All right, this was one of the engineers.
It's always somebody else. It's always someone.
This one clearly, I'm not going to take this one. So this is an engineer working for me, and he is a seasoned engineer. He thinks very highly of himself, and rightly so. But very competent.
We all do.
Very, very competent engineer.
Never met a humble engineer.
So he's troubleshooting an installation that a more junior engineer installed, and they've run into some weird problem, and so they call in the big guns. We escalate this up through our chain, and so he's looking at it and he's like, and he does what many network engineers, so communications wise does. Sometimes you run into a wall and you're like, all right, I got to see if this is going to work at all. And so he puts in a statement. Those that go back a little bit, you'll recognize this. It's called IP any. All right. And without giving you guys a lesson in firewall, what it means is, hey, just let it all the traffic through, in, outbound. We don't care. Talk to
I don't
anybody
know
you
if it's
want in
a
the
firewall
world.
issue or not.
Yeah. And so it eliminates that sort of issue. And he went on and did some other stuff. That wasn't his fix. It was never his fix. It was one of the steps he was using to fix it. And so at the end of the day, problems are resolved and we go on. But the problem is we've got an IP any statement that did not get removed from this firewall, which is also running a phone system. And we were troubleshooting calls. We were having some issue making calls. And sure enough, not long after that, that phone system was able to make all the calls it needed around the world. There's these 900 numbers down in the Caribbean Islands that charge like $10 a minute. Man, it could call those things all day long, literally all day long. And so we ran into an enormous disaster because of a really, really dumb mistake.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and launch off that and go with one that this was not me. So, for those of you who came out of the early 2000s and you were a sysadmin, I'm looking at you, fellow brethren from the trenches. And all you new IT people that have been like since 2010 on, I get it. You've had your hard times and you've had your interesting like deployments. The 2000s were the freaking Wild West, people. You didn't know what you were walking into from one day to another. And it was, craziness, just absolute craziness. So you would walk into these networks that were built by whoever they could find. Somebody, if
Yes.
you could
Yes.
just talk the talk, you got to
Yep.
put together the network. You might
Yep.
have been a latrine digger in your previous life. And now you're in charge of putting together this network. The people that I'm talking about, the trenches, are the ones who had to come in afterwards and clean up the sewage and the mess. So I have walked into a number of these networks, and that's how I got good at network engineering. Not great, but I get good at it. And one of the networks I walked into, great job, fantastic place to work. I walked in, it was my first private sector job. And it was obvious that the person before me had a very rudimentary understanding of subnetting and
Oh,
VLAN
yeah.
and did not know which was which.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like I walking in as a young gentleman, just, getting started in a career, 5 years in, first private sector job, you assume that everybody else just knows what they're doing. And I'd worked in a great IT department before that where we had some really great professionals and some great mentors that taught me a lot. I did not understand that there were a lot of idiots out there. Maybe idiots, very naive, arrogant people, we'll call them.
Yeah.
And I remember trying to figure out why this guy, he ran me through his day. And I remember thinking, man, what, you don't do much. Like, why does it take so long to do everything? So some of you have heard this story before, but like they would upload the client database to the website every morning and it took 4 hours. Why did it take 4 hours? Because there'd be some errors in it and you'd have to like catch the SQL errors and fix them. And, then you would clean up the data a little bit more and then upload again. It would take about 40 minutes per upload to an hour per upload. And if there was an error, you had to start over again. And I realized that they had like a 1.5 meg connection. At the time, 10 meg connections were just becoming popular. They were starting to get cheap. And I know everybody says like 10 megs. What the heck? Screw you all. 10 megs
Yeah.
is awesome. And I got a 1010 connection. And I basically turned this upload into like a 5-minute thing. And so in the morning, I would be done in the first 20 minutes, my first cup of coffee. The previous person just thought this is the way it was. Anyways, that was my first red flag of like, why wasn't he doing this? It was cheaper to go to 10 megs at the time. It was cheaper and better in every way. And so, okay, I caught a mistake. Next mistake, emails are constantly being flagged and bounced, and we cannot figure out why. Sometimes it would take 4 hours for an email to come in. Like, well, let me look into this. So I looked at it. Sure enough, best practice. They have a nice email smart host. This is like 2005, six, and nice email smart host. Um, Great idea. But when you're talking CIDR notation, people, /24 does not mean 0 through 24. It does
Yeah.
not mean the first 24 IPs. It
Yep.
means
All
all of
the
them
subnets.
in
Yep.
that subnet, all there. But I looked in the firewall rules and they had just done 0 through 24 for all the subnets that they were given. So anytime it didn't originate from one of those, it just bounced until it did come back through one of them. Basically going through like
Eventually it would. Eventually it would. Yeah. I've
going
seen
for
that
like
now.
a year, and the entire company had just accepted the fact that sometimes emails took a while to come in. Kind of like sometimes when you send a post message, sometimes it takes 3 days, sometimes it takes 4 days. It's just the way the world works.
Yeah.
No, that's not how the world works in email. And so I ended up fixing that, and I think that's when I started thinking, what else is going on? So I
Well,
did a deep
sometimes
dive
those,
into the network.
I think you're deviating here. I don't know. I think those are dumb mistakes. Those are incompetent mistakes. You know.
And so I start deep diving through this network, and I find this VLAN that the previous guy was very proud of. Like, he created these VLANs to keep backups nice and quiet. They're doing disk-based backups, a really next gen thing.
That
You
is, yeah.
pull the disk out, put a new disk in, and our hard drive out, no tapes. They were on tapeless, and it was great, but it was erroring all the time. So I'd spend a lot of my day trying to figure out why it errored out. And it turns out he wasn't running a VLAN; he was running subnets on one VLAN
Yeah.
on this little crappy switch.
Massive
And so there
collision
were
range.
collisions and noise happening all the time because he's running all the backups at the same time, and they were erroring out because they was just saturating this switch. So I fixed that. By the time I was done fixing all these dumb mistakes, my day was relegated to about an hour of work every morning. And then I talked to my boss about it, and he's like, "Well, if you don't have anything else to do, play some World of Warcraft or something." Which,
There we go.
okay, I never thought about playing games at work, so I played some games at work, and I wait for calls to come in. And so I started taking like phone calls from people like with problems like with the business side, and actually started getting to know the business pretty well because I had nothing to do in IT. And eventually, I got reduction in force because there was nothing for me to do. And I made some MSP out there really happy because I got this little contract
Yep.
because there was so little to do.
Well,
And I was like, I worked myself out of a job
and
just for seeing
that's
somebody else's dumb mistakes.
yeah, and I guess sometimes you have to step back and take a look. I mean, we all make dumb mistakes. You know, I've got my story of unplugging production server,
Who
middle of the
doesn't?
day as well. That seems to be the standard one. But sometimes you have to look at people, and dumb mistakes are going to happen. Are they the rarity? Can you dive into them? Will people own them? That's a big question. Um, I had a really, really bad one. It's kind of complicated. I won't share it because it's old, old technology, and it's too boring. But I made a really dumb mistake, and I owned it. Though I really did. I mean, I went to the owner of the company and said, "I screwed this up." And I was 19 years old. I was so scared. I thought for sure he was just gonna lurch up and bite my head off instantly. But he didn't. He handled it well. I appreciated the maturity that he had. And so handling these dumb mistakes, I think is really a challenge for us because they're going to happen. But then you have to take a look at situations like you were telling us there, Adam. I mean, this is a series of dumb mistakes. And, how do you determine a dumb mistake from incompetence? And I think probably repetition. Repetition is probably the
Keep making
key
the dumb
indicator
mistake.
there.
Well,
Is
and that brings up a good point I wanted to make, which was, um, when you have an engineer, and I learned this firsthand. This is Adam Walter, one of my life lessons I learned. Um, you go take an engineer who was a great engineer, and you see them starting to make more and more dumb mistakes, and they start looking incompetent. Start looking at that engineer a little closer. It could be that they're exhausted. When you are sleep deprived, you make dumb mistakes. And I remember I was at a job, and I've told this story many times, that like I got to the point where I was working 80-hour weeks like every weekend, and then I would be on call for a week, and then I'd be on backup on call, and the primary call wouldn't take their call. So I was on call for 2 weeks straight. So I wasn't sleeping through the night for 2 weeks straight out of every 4 weeks. And I remember thinking, I am the worst engineer in the world because I keep making just dumb mistakes. Like I accidentally unplugged a core firewall when I was behind it. That was a tangled mess, but I should have been better at like
Careful.
verifying that the plugs had enough slack to them, or doing things like, for those of you engineers out there, doing a copy run start.
Yeah.
You know, just dumb things, and you start making all these mistakes. Like, this is not who I am. Am I just in over my head? And by the end of like the 6-month hell that I went through, I was just incompetent. I thought of myself as an incompetent engineer, and um, I ended up sleeping for 2 to 3 straight weeks at about 12 hours a night. And when I got out of that, I'm like, oh my gosh,
A lot to make up.
wow, what a difference. And I remember that wasn't good. And I remember my wife saying, yeah, it wasn't fun for any of us. I did not know how many dumb things I was doing, not just in engineering, but in my personal life, just because I was cranky. I was doing stupid things, but it's because literally my brain was dumb. Like I just wasn't thinking. And, you got to kind of watch out for dumb mistakes, because sometimes when you start making more and more dumb mistakes, it's because something else is going on, either sleep deprivation or stress levels, and you got to manage that crap. So, sorry to get a little serious there, but like,
Yeah.
it was a very important lesson in my life of understanding when you've gone from great engineer to crappy engineer. Like, it may not be that you're in over your head, but it may be that you need to get some sleep.
Well, and for all these mistakes, I mean, I think this is fairly universally understood. You can learn from your mistakes, and
Yes.
and even the dumb ones. I mean, sometimes we're very methodical about it and very analytical, and we do something, and it is a mistake, and we come back and we reevaluate. We go, where did we mess up here? And that's one track. But sometimes we just make dumb mistakes, and you need to look at those and say, hey, is there something that we can do about that? Or do we just need to recognize that, perhaps there's nothing specific. We just need to, in general, be more careful, all these sort of deals. And back to the engineer who, can own their mistakes, right? If even the best of them out there are going to make mistakes, if they can step up and go, yep, I really flubbed that one. Here's what I did wrong. Then everyone can learn from those, because those really good engineers, whether they know it or not, they're leading parts of the team. People look up to them, even if they're, oddly enough, even if they're just total jerks. If they've got an extreme technical skill set, people look up to them in the organization. And when they set this expectation of, yeah, I'm really hot stuff, but I do make a mistake every once in a while, and I own up to it, I think that really changes the dynamic within some of those organizations, and it seems to lower the hubris level a little bit. Those younger engineers, like, oh, okay, everyone can make mistakes. I don't have to be perfect. I just need to work to be better. And setting those expectations within your technical teams, I think, really makes them better overall.
Give people permission to fail.
Yes.
And you do that by admitting your mistakes. So like that previous story I told, like I got let go from that job. Now I could hide that, and I could say, oh, I've never been fired. I've been reduction in force. My first story. I've considered that a badge of honor. And then I got let go from that other job. And I look back on why and what happened there and how do I become better. One of the things I changed was being very deliberate about my sleep habits. Being very protective about them. And that made me a better leader and a better engineer. I ended up in leadership positions after that. I ended up in some really great jobs, and I was able to handle a lot more stress because I was managing my sleep schedule more. But in life, we tend to say, let's cover up our mistakes because we don't want people to know that we're a failure. Instead, tell your employees about the times you failed and the lessons that you've learned from your dumb mistakes. Like, oh yeah, I made a stupid mistake with cash flow last year and I learned from it. And here's where I am. You talk to any business owner and you will find out that at some point in their life, they made a dumb mistake with cash flow. And it
Yeah.
happens where you're like, holy crap, I have no money left. What happened there? Like, well, you didn't forecast appropriately.
Yep.
And I was in a business presentation talk earlier this week, and that was one of the big things they hit on. Is like almost every business owner makes mistakes with forecasting their cash flow, and I'm like, no, I made my mistakes, and I've learned, and I was like, it totally resonated with me, and as Skip can tell you, like we go through our budget like almost weekly. We talk about, okay, where are we? Are we in a good place? And I'm forecasting out in 6 months. Here's how much cash we need to have on hand in order to do this and this and this initiative. And it's a little complicated, and I really don't like doing it. But I learned from the mistake in the past, and now I'm working forward. And by admitting your mistakes to your employees, you help them avoid the same mistakes or give them permission to say, yeah, I screwed up. Here's how I'm going to fix it going forward. Now, if the employee keeps making mistake after mistake after mistake, you got incompetence.
Yeah, that's a different issue.
Like the wrong person in the wrong seat. Maybe they're a great person in the wrong seat. It's still a problem. But if you have somebody who makes a mistake and then the next time they reduce the mistake or their competence raises a little bit because, I'm not going to do that again. Last time I accidentally unplugged the server when I did that. Here's my checks and balances. Last time I did this. So seeing your employee grow is one of the most rewarding things in the planet.
Yeah. So to kind of, to put a sentence on that, on all of this one, I guess there is an opportunity to let dumb mistakes make you smarter.
Yes.
So, you just really, find a way to take something out of those. And sometimes they're key indicators. If they keep happening, well, they're not dumb mistakes. They're insightful mistakes. But being able to own them, I think that was the early lesson I learned. I mean, I lost customers' data. That when I was talking about early on, at 19 years old, been working in IT for all of 2 years, I guess, maybe even a year and a half. I don't want to hit a 2-year anniversary, and it was just gone. I mean, there was no recovering it. No technology available back then to fix that, and it scared me to death. But I didn't know what else to do. I was so scared I didn't know what else to do but tell the truth.
Yeah.
So but that changed once I could but basically get my heart rate down and calm down a little bit. I realized I did the right thing. And that really did change my career and change the way I approached things, because I'd kind of, broken through that barrier, or, I cut my teeth on being honest when it was really, really hard, and owning my dumb mistake. And I'm glad I went through that. I mean, I think it made me a better engineer. I hope it made me a better person, but, it was a valuable lesson at just 19 and, young and stupid.
Yeah. And, growing and making dumb mistakes is just part of it. And I feel like for some reason, I don't know if it was just a previous generation thing, but like making mistakes was considered always incompetence rather than a growth opportunity. And I think people just tended to hide it too much. Giving people permission to make dumb mistakes and learn is great. Just don't make the dumb mistakes on a critical system.
Yeah.
I gotta say that makes for long days. If you see that pattern of dumb mistakes, look for why the pattern exists. Is it incompetence? Is it an unhealthy employee? Is it somebody who needs to be taught or given permission to make mistakes? Whatever it is, look into it. Celebrate the dumb mistakes that, where you learned from it. Well, we know not to do that anymore. Or, hey, we're gonna change the way we do things so that we mitigate the risks next time. Because wow, that stung.
Yeah.
And so dumb mistakes happen. And it's almost like if they don't happen, you kind of wonder, okay, how good are people at covering things up, or do I just have
being hidden? Yes. What's covered up? Yeah.
Yeah. So, with dumb mistakes, to put my wrapper on this, dumb mistakes happen. happen to everyone. They happen to the best of us, so to speak. And the thing is, do you learn from them? Do you laugh them off? And what can they tell you about your employees? If they're not coming to you with their dumb mistakes, are they afraid of you?
There you go.
Do they not feel like you have a culture of openness where they can admit their dumb mistakes and ask for advice on how to avoid it in the future? Or are they learning from it? Are they learning from the stupid mistake they made, saying, "Oh crap, I shouldn't do that again"? Do they know they're making dumb mistakes? Are they are they in a spot where they have an adequate oversight where people can see they made a dumb mistake and that's being corrected? So there's a lot of things that come from this topic, and it's very important to MSPs to take away how are you dealing with what you call dumb mistakes? Is your environment conducive to learning? And are your employees being taken care of? And if you look at this as a growth mechanic or a litmus test, you're going to have a great time as a technology firm. If you have a firm where they're being hidden and people are ashamed of them, maybe change that culture.
Yep, because they're going to come out. It's going to happen.
All right, and that's it for this week. Man, we're getting into April here, man. This year is getting away from us. I'm looking forward to our next series here. I kind of want to hit back into some marketing pretty soon, so we'll see what comes up next week if we can get some people on.
Sounds
Thank
great.
you, and we'll see you all later.